Hi everyone, my name is Chesney and I want to share a part of my PhD research here titled Socio-Ecological Systems, Cultural Histories and Ecological Dynamics, Settlement Narratives in Southern Guinea-Bissau. This study adds to the comparative ethnoecology needed to develop a proper comprehension of the historical dynamics between resource and land use in West Africa to monitor and even predict or preempt changes. When together, ethnoecology studying people's relationships and understandings of their environments, and political ecology studying the socioeconomic and political factors impacting people's relationships with their environments, can reconstruct the social life of forests and other ecosystems. Oral histories recounting settlement offer valuable insights into the historical context of the region and the people who live there. These stories can help us to understand how people maintain a connection with the past that may shape their present-day practices and how they intersect with environmental matters. We aim to examine the motivations for settlement establishment in southern Guinea-Bissau through oral histories narrated by present-day residents. In doing so, a secondary aim emerged: to identify the contemporary social and economic challenges in these landscapes related to conservation policies and environmental change. So where? Guinea-Bissau is one of the smallest countries in West Africa. We conducted research in each of the villages present with a blue dot here in southern Guinea-Bissau, mostly in the Tombali region in 3 sectors, and that's Katio further north, Chesney further south on the border with Guinea-Conakry, and Vedanda in the middle, which roughly coincides with the boundaries of Cantonesh National Park. The landscapes here are really diverse: mangroves, forests, agricultural areas, and wildlife too is really diverse, including over 35 species of medium to large sized mammals, like critically endangered chimpanzees. But what if, as Singh asks, we were to turn our perspective to give careful attention to the making of these species diverse but social landscapes? So we used a combination of methods, including a literature review, 52 group interviews where we asked questions like who founded the village, when, why did they choose this place and not another, for example. Throughout my PhD fieldwork, I used other methods as well, not specifically with the objective of exploring these settlement narratives, but sometimes the stories overlapped, and so they were included. And also, maybe worth mentioning, I've been working in Tombali since 2019. So throughout this period of data collection, data has been stored, organised and analysed to better interpret findings. I use in vivo. It's difficult to present this research really chronologically because the stories are passed down through generations and are indigenous and local narratives, so dates and other aspects are fluid and reconstructed. I'm not comparing with a written story. These memories have a socio-political importance and they're also an expression of the relationships with the environment. All quotes in the slides are from the group interviews unless otherwise stated. Before we start looking into socio-ecological encounters, I think it's important to understand the stories as told by the people in the landscape today, and the most salient code in the interviews are references to supernatural or spiritual encounters. Today, people of the Nalu ethnic group represent only about 1% of the national population in Guinea-Bissau, but as the first to arrive are traditionally considered the original landowners to around 5% of the land, and that is coastal areas in Tombali region where we work. So to begin to understand this different from my own cosmology, I thought it was important to get to grips with the main actor in these stories, and that is Iran. Iran could be translated as spirit or supernatural entity, and the story is like this. Irans were present in Tombali before people. When the Nalu arrived, they made a contract with them to be able to establish villages and work the land. They're also reported to control access to natural resources. For example, Irans can stop the land from being productive if the contract that people made with them is broken. Some Nalu people are seen as a kind of intermediary between the living and spiritual worlds because of the ruling lineages in Nalu villages were the ones who established this original contract with the Iran. Iran are thought to primarily reside near large trees like this one, most commonly reported as poilons, but they can also be found in other parts of the land or even water. They can control natural forces such as the wind and animals such as bees. They can take many forms or no form and have the ability to shapeshift too. They can also occupy a human body, and there are reports of people coming back from places changed. People say at that time, the time of founding the village, Nalu would talk to the Iran to ask permission to form a village. Or they told stories explaining their exodus from one place to another, as retold by their ancestors. So our grandfathers are people from an old village in the forest. Us Nalu have our traditional ways. Witchcraft took them from there to here. They thought through the magic that if they stayed there, they would die, so they all ran away to here. But to take over the land and not just put a village, they had to do a ritual ceremony where they looked into bones to find a good place, and that's how the Iran said to them to sit here. Everyone that was in that ceremony then came here. With these kind of stories and the foundations, systems of local governance in Guinea-Bissau are entrenched with actors in metaphysical categories, and these actors, in syncretic African Islam like in Guinea-Bissau, lead to a crossing between supernatural entities and conceptions of natural elements. In recounting stories related with what we coded the supernatural, the most frequent words were actually animals and forest. With this background, we can then ask other questions about the first people in the Tombali region. The first Nalis to settle in southern Guinea-Bissau were hunters. A current village chief explained, at that time, before the independence war, so that's before the 1960s, Nalu people were searching for places. People were hunting here, and after they successfully hunted a few times, they thought this place had good luck. Things were going well, so after a few years they called their families to come. More villages now inside the national park mention their village was created because of more hunting access than the villages outside the national park. So, more wildlife then was the reason for both village establishment and the establishment of the national park. Fishing was also important, and with many options on these peninsulas. Fishing with nets and canoes, with nets by foot, spearfishing with fishing rods, and through barricading river inlets in the mangroves. Some villages were founded out of the expansion of fishing camps from temporary settlements to more permanent villages. Palms are also frequently mentioned in the stories of the foundation of the first villages in the region. Palm trees, natural to the environment, including the African fan palm, are important in the placement of villages because the wood of the tree is used to construct houses. People also say the leaves are reportedly useful for hunting. Another, maybe even more important naturally occurring palm is the African oil palm, which is used by all people in Guinea-Bissau to some extent. African oil palm is used to produce oil, wine, food, soap, medicine, the list really goes on. Another tree commonly associated with Nalu placement of villages is kola. Kola is important to people in Guinea-Bissau medicinally and in ritual and ceremonial traditions such as at naming ceremonies, marriages and funerals. My supervisor, Amelia, wrote in 2010 that some past functions of palm wine as symbols of union has shifted to kola. She wrote, among the Nali, since Islamization, the use and symbolic perception of plants has changed, and all situations of strong social interaction have been marked by the sharing of kola nuts. After the Nali, the next ethnic group to live in Tombali were the Balanta, wetland rice or Balanya cultivation experts. Though southern Guinea-Bissau is referred to as Nalu homeland, the Balanta population now constitutes the majority, having arrived in large numbers since the 20th century. Brandon says the Nalu people accepted the Balanta in their territories because of low population density as demanded by their distribution for wetland rice production and mutually beneficial economic arrangements. So this is rice from the Balanta and land from the Nalu. For multiple decades now, Nalu people have also been working in wetland rice production, often in areas originally built by the Balanta. Today, changes in sea levels are affecting Bolanyas, and there is ongoing work by others to mitigate the effects of climate change here, reforesting mangrove areas, for example. In more recent times, within the lifetimes of the current generations, there have been many changes in Guinea-Bissau. For example, in 1974 the country gained independence. Since the 20th century, Islam has been gaining force in the region, and since the 2000s the national park has become established and made its own shapings of the landscape and people. With little time, I take cashew as one such example of change, where people report neoliberalism arising after independence to change market forces. Islam reportedly increased motivations for cash crop cultivation. Before the 1950s, cashew in Tombali was non-existent, or if present in very small amounts. In 2022, approximately 13% of the land use within Cantonesh and more outside the national park is designated for cash crop cashew orchards. Over 95% of my interviewees throughout my PhD have or work on cashew orchards. This refocus towards the cultivation of cashew requires a shift. For example, people expert in wetland rice production now must acquire not mangrove swampland but forest savanna land. The huge rise of cashew orchards have led to many other problems with land too. Vast areas of shifting cultivation have all been planted up with cashew, and the situation is increasingly tense for people to be able to find sufficient land to work on, especially with the quick changing, unstable price of cashew in the national market driven by international demand. Selling of land is causing other problems too. In 2008, Tamudo wrote, "Tensions between landlords and latecomers are low. Now I can certainly no longer say this is true. Benali never sold land but gave it, and this is one tension arising from changes that can be tracked to these global market forces. The regular, a king in Tombali, said, "In my opinion, our state is fragile. If someone gave you something, not sold it, then you sold it to someone else. It is a crime. This is bringing many problems." Other tensions, or better should I say frictions, arise with the establishment of the national park, which regulates on matters related with these identities as I've been describing. Rules on hunting and fishing, for example. In comparison to previous research, our findings provide a more landscape-level understanding of the socio-ecological interactions by incorporating oral histories across a large spatial scale, both inside and outside of the national park, which has often been underrepresented in literature. The implications of these findings are significant in that they emphasize the necessity of integrating local historical and cultural knowledge into environmental management policies. This approach can enhance the resilience and sustainability of socio-ecological systems in the face of environmental changes, integral to protected area management and sustainable development. Ultimately, this study underscores the importance of continually revisiting and revising conservation policies to accommodate the dynamic nature of socio-ecological landscapes. By grounding conservation strategies in both historical context and contemporary realities, there is potential to create management approaches that are not only sustainable but also respectful of the cultural dimensions in these landscapes. The interdisciplinary nature of this research offers a framework for future studies and conservation efforts that seek to balance ecological sustainability with cultural integrity. By acknowledging the spiritual and cultural dimensions alongside environmental factors, this study advocates for conservation strategies that are adaptive, inclusive, and respectful of the communities they aim to serve. The findings underscore the need for continual reassessment of conservation policies to ensure they remain relevant and effective in these ever-evolving landscapes. Thank you very much for listening, and I welcome any and all feedback. I'd like to also thank all of our interviewees and our amazing team in Guinea-Bissau, especially Yaya and Mamadi and the Bissau-Guinean Institute for Biodiversity and Protected Areas. And if there's time, are there any questions?